Hello and welcome to the NKU Chase College of Law Admission Counseling Series. In this presentation, we will cover the topic of managing the application process. My name is Ashley Seamer and I am the Director of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management for Salmon P. Chase College of Law. So in today's series, we are going to, again, cover the managing of the application process. If you have watched our previous series, you have been preparing your application and are ready to begin thinking about submitting applications to law school. So our roadmap for this session, first, we're going to cover the pre-application stage. And we're not going to cover things that were discussed in our previous series, but rather a few tips on right before you start to submit applications to law school, what you should be thinking about and preparing. Next, we will cover that period of time after submitting the application and before decision from the law schools to which you are applying. And we'll conclude with after you receive a decision from the law schools on your application, what should those next steps be for you? So first, the pre-application. By the time you get to this stage, again, you should have already prepared all of your application materials. You've prepared your personal statement, you have your letters of recommendation, your transcripts are to the law school admissions service and counsel for your credential assembly service. You have prepared any additional attachments and you're ready to go. So the very first thing that you need to make sure you're clear about prior to submitting applications to law school is that you truly understand the requirements for the law school to which you are applying. So what do I mean by the requirements? Most law schools are going to have some standard requirements. You're going to have requirements for taking the LSAT, submitting your academic credentials, and for the most part, those are pretty standard across law schools across the country. However, there might be a few places where the law schools vary as to what the requirements are going to be. So one of the big areas, as we covered in the series on letters of recommendation, is to understand how many letters of recommendation are required by the law schools to which you are applying. So at Chase, we require 0 letters of recommendation. We highly recommend 2, but you can go to the committee for a decision even if you don't have any letters of recommendation on file, provided all of the other requirements are met. Another law school may have a requirement that 2 letters of recommendation be on file. And so if you have applied to both Chase and to the other law school, you're likely to hear a decision from us well before you're going to hear a decision from the other school if you don't have those 2 letters of recommendation on file. So it's important that you understand that particular requirement because it will help to ease any sort of anxiety or also make that process a little more smoothly for you because you know when you're likely to be reviewed. Second, you want to understand the requirement of the academic record. Again, at Chase, all transcripts have to be on file before we'll consider a review of your application. So if you are missing a transcript, for instance, from a community college, or you have a financial obligation at a school and they've not released your transcript, we will not be forwarding your file to the committee for a decision until we receive all transcripts from the law school admission council. Another school, for instance, however, may only require that you have your degree granting school transcript on file, and they'll read your file even if there are other transcripts missing or if there's financial obligations pending. So again, it's important that you understand schools will send your file differently depending on what those requirements are. You also just want to double check the instructions for all of the law schools to which you are applying about joint degree applications. Are you required to submit an application if you're considering a joint degree to a different college? Again, at Chase, if you're applying, for instance, to our JD MBA, you have to submit an application to the law school but you also have to complete the application that's through the Office of Graduate Education to be considered for the MBA portion. And it's important, again, to note which schools have what requirements for where to submit applications. Finally, another area that can cause some confusion because the requirements may seem different will just be the requirements as far as are resumes required? Do you have your personal statement in the appropriate format requested by the particular law school? Have you addressed all of the additional attachments that might be required for a law school? And so I encourage you to look through the instructions for the applications from the schools to which you plan to apply. The next step in your pre-application process is to create your email plan. I will tell you, it is no secret that law schools send a ton of emails, and you're going to learn that pretty soon once you start the process. First of all, there are emails that might come to you from law schools because you have elected to participate in the Law School Admission Council's candidate referral service. And so you might be getting emails that tend to feel mostly like just general outreach emails, learning about programs, learning about offerings at law schools, and you might be receiving them from law schools that you have not even considered. Over time, this can be pretty overwhelming because if you're also applying to law schools, they're going to be sending you emails about your application. So it's really important that you think about what your email plan is going to be. Now, my recommendation is to go ahead and set up a separate email account that you're only going to use for the law school admissions process. Why do I make that tip? Why do I ask you to have one more email to manage? Well, I feel like if you have a dedicated law school email admissions account, you would better be able to manage the number of emails that are coming in and make sure that nothing gets lost. For instance, I have probably 4 different emails. Of course, I have my work email, I have my personal email, and then I have a couple of different accounts that maybe I give when I have to do an online order somewhere, because I don't want those emails junking up those other 2 email systems where I really need to pay close attention to the material coming in. And for this reason, it might be wise for you to set that up. Now, if you choose not to, just remember you'll need to manage your email plan, knowing there are going to be several emails coming to you, both from a just general overview, getting to know you type emails, to those really important ones concerning your application. Another tip right now, there are certain providers like Gmail or Yahoo, Hotmail, where they may send a lot of emails from law schools into the spam folder. And even your university email has the spam settings set pretty high. So if you don't know where your spam folder is, take a moment, pull up your email, and look for the folder called spam. I know I have a Gmail account and I have a folder called junk, and I also have a folder called spam. And when I'm asking people to check their spam because I feel like they've probably received the email, it's just gone there, sometimes they're just checking the junk folder. They're not the same thing. You need to check for the folder labeled spam. If you're not familiar with how to access spam at your university's level, sometimes it's called a quarantine, or they have a special separate login that you have to go through. Please contact your university's IT department so that you understand how to access emails that may have been diverted into that quarantine or spam system. Once you find that emails are going into spam, if it's a school that, again, you're really interested in or need to keep on top of, be sure to do everything you can to make it a safe sender, to mark not spam, but you want to start to get into the habit of checking that on a regular basis. And finally, before submitting your application, develop an application management system. And what I mean by this, it can be something as simple as a notebook, if you're someone who just likes good old-fashioned handwriting, or it can be an Excel spreadsheet, or a smart sheet, or a Google form, whatever you're comfortable, but something that will allow you to put information in. At the minimum, you should list every school that you've applied to, the date when you have submitted the application, and go ahead and make note of people who are important at that particular law school to reach out to for questions. So note the general email address for the law school admission office at the school you're applying to. Maybe note if you've been working with a particular person in the admissions office, if there's someone like a director of admissions that you've been working with, note their name and email. And that's important because you don't have to waste time if you do need to follow up with someone at that law school. And then maybe have a column for just general updates when you're getting information from the law school after you have started the application process, so you know where you are at each particular law school. So now that you're ready to submit the application, you'll go through, of course, the Law School Admission Council's website where all of the applications are managed, and complete and submit those applications. And one of the first things that you might start to find after you submit the application is you're going to receive information, likely via email. And I'll tell you, we rarely send mail anymore. And most of the 99.9% of the communication that we're going to do with you is going to be via email. And so via email, you're likely to receive a piece of information known as an online status checker. And this will have a login. You have to set a password, but this is a service that's also provided through the Law School Admission Council for schools to give you a chance to check the status of your application. And so you'll want to note that particular piece of information again in your application management system. Make sure you set up the password. The online status checker, again, will just help you when we have received decisions back from the admissions committee and have changed your status. There will be a notice placed on your online status checker as to where you are. And again, that email usually comes after you hit submit. So if you haven't heard within a day or two after submitting an application to a school, 1 to 2 business days, not necessarily on the weekend, again, go back and check your spam folder, search maybe for, if you're not seeing it, maybe search for the name of the school, a simple name, just to see what pops up, because chances are pretty good that there's likely to be an email that just acknowledges the submission of your application. At Chase, that's exactly what happens in our process. Once we receive an application in through the system, we do send out an email that has the online status checker information and an acknowledgement that we've received your application, and just other pieces of information that might be important to you at that time. It's also important after submitting the application that you start to manage and possibly adjust your timeline expectations. We live in a world, trust me, I know when I order something, typically it's going to be here 2 days later. I'm not so sure that this is true in law school admissions. Please note that we take your application very seriously, and we still use a committee of faculty members to review your application. We have to go through our own process to check to make sure everything's there, that you've met those requirements that I mentioned earlier, and forwarding your information to the members of the committee for review, allowing them enough time to carefully read through the application and then meet in order to make a decision. And so it's not a fast process. On average, we usually could find it takes somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks to get a decision back. Now that's an average. Depending on the time of the year, it may be a little shorter in time, or it may be a little bit longer. So let me give you just a few pieces of information. Our application opens September 1. We're not likely to be reviewing applications by September the 2nd. Typically, we start reviewing applications in October because that gives us what we consider a good amount of applications to begin the review process. So if you apply September 1, it's unlikely that you're going to hear anything within 2 to 4 weeks. Rather, you're likely going to go out to this committee in October, and it might be 2 to 4 weeks from that point in time. Also during the fall, we usually only meet once, maybe twice a month. So October, November, and December. And we also close in December for the holiday season or the winter break period. So usually from mid-December till about mid-January, we're not reviewing applications. Now, this may or may not be true for other schools, but I suspect that it's similar. So just know that in that fall period of time, if you're wanting to receive an answer prior to the end of the year, I encourage you to have your application in no later than the early part of November. After that, we typically start back up in January, and we do meet weekly at that point in time because that is when the bulk of the applications come in. And so people might hear a little bit sooner rather than 2 weeks. It might look a little bit more like 10 days, or it could be still 4 weeks. So just adjust your timeline expectation as to when you're going to receive a decision. Usually that information can be found in an email or in the or on the website. You'll also note that you'll receive from Chase Law along the way different emails updating your status. So I mentioned you'll receive an acknowledgement of your application being submitted. You will then also receive an application when it's email when it's complete, when it has moved on to committee. So that can help you understand where you are in the process and what that timeline looks for you. And then finally, as you're getting those notices, update your application management record. Just a quick jot down like, okay, I've moved to committee on this particular date, because then you're able to see, okay, where am I going to be in that 2 to 4 weeks to help you determine whether or not you need to take this next step, which is reaching out reasonably. And I say reasonably because if you have been listening to the advice so far, submitting the applications and then 2 days later emailing the admissions office where your decision is not really reasonable. We've probably taken some steps to let you know what the expectation for receiving the decision will be, and it comes across a little bit unprofessional. However, if you've submitted the application and you've checked your spam folder and you haven't heard anything for a week or more, I think that's reasonable to reach out to the school and just say, I just wanted to make sure you received my application materials. Because at that time, I would reply back if you had asked me, and I would have said, well, it looks like we had sent you an email 3 or 4 days ago. How can we help you find that email? Do we need to add another email to your record if that one's not very reliable? If you've received an email that you've been in committee and it's now 6 weeks later, it's reasonable to reach out and say, I haven't heard a decision. It's been about 6 weeks since I've gone to committee. Can you help me understand where I am in your process? And those are definitely well-received emails, and we'd be happy to help you. All right, finally, after decision. So what's next if I am admitted? Well, first of all, hey, that's great news. If you've been admitted to a law school, there are going to be next steps. The biggest thing that you need to understand is that law schools fall under a statement of good practices where we usually agree that we will not ask you for any sort of financial deposit prior to the 1st of April. Now, what that means is, again, if you're considering a fall start, that might be different if you're looking at a different term for a particular law school, if they offer that. So knowing that we're not going to ask for any sort of financial commitment until April 1st, the next steps that you're going to want to take are getting to know the school a little bit more. Do they have a Facebook group? Do they have upcoming events that I can attend as an admitted student? Are there people that I need to talk with? Do they have an opportunity for me to chat with a current law school student? Take advantage of all those things, knowing that from the time you hear the decision to at least that first financial commitment, and if you're not sure if you want to make one, that you're doing your due diligence and getting to know the school and see where it might be a good fit for you. Also know that scholarships, the decision of scholarships tend to fall in one of two ways. Some schools send that information right along with the admissions offer. Other schools might send your admissions decision and then follow up a short time thereafter with a scholarship award. So here again, just understand it might be reasonable for it to come separately and to not panic just right away, because you don't have to really make any decisions until the first part of April. After April, you do have commitment deadlines, so note in your application management system when that school requires a financial commitment. Now, deposits do not require you to attend. They don't lock you in. I've often heard that term, to a particular school, but it does indicate that you would still like your seat to be reserved, and the school will do that. So just note those deadlines. It's also really important, if you are admitted, that you become super aware again of the email. We send so many pieces of information about getting started, what your next steps are, what you need to be aware of to our admitted applicants. And so going through the process of making sure you stay on top of checking your email and again your spam folder will make sure that you are staying aware of what's coming up for you. So again, those dates and deadlines. When do you need to have your deposits paid? Another big step for an admitted applicant is if you have applied before receiving your bachelor's degree, because most in a typical year will maybe receive it in that May, just make a note that you need to submit your final transcript to the Law School Admission Council once you have graduated and received your degree from your degree granting school. Well, what does it mean if I'm on hold? So if your first decision from the law school seems to indicate this status of a hold, or we've reviewed your application and we've not made a final decision, this is an appropriate time to read through the information that was presented to you and follow up. Do you need to submit updated grades? Do you need to retake the LSAT? Do you need to follow up with your admissions contact at that particular school to see what steps that they would suggest? More often than not, on hold, or again, sort of not made a final decision, means you could be a candidate where there are some very solid qualities about you that the committee is interested in, but there are other parts of your application where they're not really as strong as other candidates coming in. And so this is a great time to reflect and say, where do I need to be a little stronger? And can I accomplish that before this application cycle closes? And if that answer is yes, then you need to take those next steps to increase the competitiveness of your file. And then finally, what if I'm denied? Well, this is definitely a difficult decision to receive, and it's also not the end of the world. And what I mean by that is you might have other offers elsewhere that are still attractive to you, and so that's great. But if there is a particular school or the other offers are just not where you want to be, just realize that you can always reach out to the admissions office and find out what steps that you need to take to strengthen your file for the next application season. Sometimes it is, again, you applied pretty late in the application process, and while your file would have been more in the category likely to be admitted earlier in the application, the longer you waited to submit the application just meant there wasn't any room in the entering class for you, or they weren't offering admissions to candidates that were similar. Or it could mean that there was just a complete mismatch with your entering your application credentials compared to the standard credentials that that school often admits. And so you'll have to make a decision to decide if there's a way for you to increase that profile to make you more competitive, or if you need to rethink for the next application cycle some more schools to add to your process so that you do stand a better chance of being admitted. So I hope this overview of managing your application process gave you some good, useful tips and information to take into account as you're getting ready for the cycle. And I want to thank you for your time and remind you that you can always contact us to schedule a one-on-one advising session. So if there's anything from the previous counseling series that you want to follow up on or information contained in this presentation, please feel free to reach out to us at chaseadmissions@nku.edu or by calling us at 859-572-5490. We look forward to working with you and helping you create the most successful admission cycle that you can. Have a great day.